All right, folks, welcome everybody once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama, and we have Greg Flamong back with us from his merry trip over there to lovely old England. And he will be producing the show and probably chiming in now and again throughout the show. Uh, Lots going on with Notre Dame football and recruiting, so we're going to get into that here shortly, and also we're going to talk a lot about the future and what to expect from this team moving forward. So before we get going, I wanted to mention once again, if you have not signed up for Irish Sports Daily, it's a great time to go to Irish Sports Daily, click on the premium section, and sign up. You can find us at irishsportsdaily.com and click on the premium section, sign up. There's lots going on with recruiting and getting ready for the season. So looking forward to that. Is also, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please find us at Irish Sports Daily. You can find our channel there, subscribe, make sure you like the videos, and that'll allow you to know when the next video is up, and it'll put it in your feed, and you'll be able to check out everything we have going on. Hit and Hustle will return this week now that Greg's back in town, so I know a lot of people missed that as well. Also wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade. It's been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit ESQ Clothing and book your appointment. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's esqclothing.com. All right. Yama. I think we have to start with the biggest news, and that's, of course, that we appear to be down to two quarterbacks. Steve Angeli is now decided he's going into the transfer portal and will be looking for a new team. And I think that the first thing I want to say more than anything is, God bless Steve Angeli. I hope he has a tremendous career. This is a guy, I feel like if there was ever a Notre Dame guy, he's a Notre Dame guy. He loved being at Notre Dame. He loved his time there. He loved the players, loved everything about Notre Dame. And he handled the whole situation with so much class and so much he's just a humble guy, and I hated seeing this because I like the guy so much. You hate seeing somebody's kind of dreams end, at least their dream at Notre Dame end. But this is the best thing for Steve. It's the best thing for Notre Dame. I think Steve needs a chance to play. I think he can be a very good college quarterback, and I hope he finds the right system, the right situation, because I do think he's a natural born leader. I think guys like him and will follow him. He just needs to find the right situation. But I just wanted to say to Steve Angeli, what a class guy. I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to watch where you go. And I think the vast majority of all, or I shouldn't say the vast majority of Notre Dame fans, I really feel that way. I think a lot of people are really kind of down about this because he's a true Notre Dame man. Your thoughts here, Jamie?
Yeah, I totally agree, Mike. And I think that, because there always is there's always a few people who were like, well, he got sacked on the on the drive that he was sacked twice on the drive where they scored the field goal in the Orange Bowl. Yeah, well, he drove him down to get him points, and he converted 3 third downs, and he was huge in that situation. And to come in cold in that specific situation and do that, which obviously would have never happened if he was a guy who was totally looking out for himself and looking for the next opportunity, right? Because he could have left in December, and we know that he had offers to go out in December, and he stayed around, and he was a big part of Notre Dame getting to the national championship game. And and then even him coming in the bowl game the previous year, he had a chance. There's a lot of guys who go into those games, and you can say, oh, well, Oregon State didn't have their top guys. Well, I mean, Blake Fisher, Joe Alt didn't play in those games. That was like Charles Jaguar and Tosh Baker, and they were not ready to play yet. And you know, Angeli had to deal with that, and he played great. And there's a lot of guys who do terrible in those situations when they get thrown in when they haven't had experience, right? So, um, I think he's a total Notre. Yeah, he's a true Notre Dame guy, a guy who I think could start, for probably half the teams on Notre Dame's schedule this year, to be honest,
Yeah.
and could start at a lot of places. I actually think he's probably, there's probably like 30 Power Four teams that I think he's better than their starter right now,
Mm-hmm.
and that might even be not
Low.
generous enough. Like,
Yeah.
It could be over half, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just one of those situations where there was whoever was going to be the person to transfer, it was going to be a good quarterback because I think all three of the guys are really good. So it's just the way it is. And that's not always the case when at Notre Dame, when they have guys and it's a competition, right? Usually there's a pretty big drop off. Usually that's why there's not much of a competition. There's one guy who's just clearly better than the others. And, it's unfortunate that it didn't work out in terms of him being the longtime starter at Notre Dame. And I don't think anyone would have been surprised if he did win the job, but it just, it happened how it happened, and you just wish him the best of luck. I mean, I think he's absolutely a guy that, most Notre Dame fans will be rooting for at his next stop.
Yeah, I saw that he's visiting Syracuse today. If memory serves, I think his offensive coordinator from high school is there or something, if memory serves. So, that may be a good situation for him if that happens, because, that guy clearly knows what Steve can do. I'm not saying that that's the position or the place he should go, but it just, we'll have to see how it all unfolds and what's the best situation for him. But tremendous character, and wish him all the best. All the best. Jamie, what I think it says, though, what it says is Marcus Freeman wants to win big, right? He got a taste last year of getting there, but I think he also understands that, hey, if you're going to get to that level, you need a guy who can win you the game, because chances are, if you're in that game, the other quarterback is the type of quarterback who can win you that game. So you need to match that. And as much as I like Steve, and I think Steve's, don't get me wrong, I think that they could probably win a national championship with Steve as well if they had all the other pieces in place and things were going well. For instance, the wide receivers make a big jump, and pass protection is even better than we're hoping, and all those things. Defense plays fantastic, and all these things that we're just not quite sure about. You could win a national championship with Steve, but I think a lot of teams that have had national championships in the recent years, a lot of them have had kind of that extra special elite quarterback. And you look at what happens in the NFL, it's the same thing. A lot of times it's some guy that can get you over the top. He's the difference. And so I think that this move, especially considering, Jamie, what we know they have coming back, this is a team that if you just put a guy in that can manage the game and do a good job, you're going to win a lot of games, no matter who you put in there, as long as the guy doesn't kill you and make bad decisions. And that's what Steve is. That's what Steve would be good at. I like the fact that Marcus Freeman says, you know what? We're here to win a national championship, and I have to do what's best for the team. And we're going to take some lumps, possibly, as these guys learn and they get their first couple starts, and obviously going down to Miami is going to be a big problem for those guys heading into that. But I think looking into it, it says that Marcus Freeman's not afraid of the unknown, and he's a risk taker. He's a guy that says, sometimes you just got to take a risk because you believe in the potential of some of these guys, that they're going to go out and they're going to do things. The other thing I think it says, Jamie, is we know Steve's a pretty damn good quarterback, right? We know that. We've seen what he can do. So Carr and Minchie, probably a little bit better. And they've already seen this. And so the way I look at this is, I'm actually a little bit excited because we know what the bar is with Steve. We know Steve's going to be a very solid quarterback. And they basically said, all right, Mr. Safe Guy, Mr. Gonna do everything right. We're gonna forego you because we think we have something better. And to me, that's exciting. Irish fans should be excited about that because it's not an easy decision. And we've seen countless times in the past, Jamie, where coaches take that conservative, let's not do anything to screw this up type of thing. And that's usually the way it works. I think we got a glimpse of that last year when we saw Anthony Knapp start, and a lot of people are like, well, that's a big gamble. Well, they kind of knew something there as well. So let's just hope that that's what we're seeing here. Your thoughts here?
I mean, I think you only have to look at, to your first point, you only have to look at what happened last year in the playoff to see that you need a quarterback who can win you a game, like go out and win the game. And when it came down to it with Riley Leonard, like fourth quarter, he's got to make like the deep ball to Jordan Faison. He makes that throw, right? Like they can't throw the ball against Georgia. He does it with his legs, like time after time on that drive where they're just churning out first downs, where he's got to outrun a guy to the corner. He's got to jump over Malachi Starks, who's, a first round safety. He's got to do that kind of stuff. And if you look at there was a lot of different things in that Penn State game, but Drew Aller versus Riley Leonard, Aller lost the game and Leonard won the game. And you could distinctly say like Leonard did this, throwing the ball to win this game, and Aller even got bailed out by having two of his picks taken off the board. He wasn't a guy who could go out and win that game. So I think that is something that is, important to kind of know. And I do think that I understand everybody, all Notre Dame fans came into this offseason. They already had like their favorite guy, right? Like everybody who's coming out and saying, Angeli should be the guy because he's got the experience and they want the experience and all that. And you could see all those people on ISD's board who are disappointed, right? They were like, I really thought that he was going to be this and that. And then there's other people who are like CJ Carr's their guy, right? And there's other people too, who Kenny Minchie was their guy and all this. They think because of the running element, they think all these different things. And everyone's got their own favorite. So I get it how some people would be disappointed thinking that like, especially like early on, he could give that kind of steadiness in games against Texas A&M and Miami. But I do think it says exactly what you're saying, that Carr and Minchie showed that they are as good or better than Angeli now. And obviously they offer a little bit something different too, in terms of just escapability, with the rush and just a little bit more running, especially Minchie. So that does matter. It does matter. And if those guys are even or better at this point now, and you already know that Angeli is really good, that says a lot about those guys. Those guys are really good, which isn't surprising. It shouldn't be surprising at all because those guys were both, in terms of how they were viewed as recruits, were both considered elite recruits. And obviously Carr was considered a little bit higher than Minchie, but Minchie was more of like the late riser, late bloomer kind of thing. But still, he was still very considered, a very, very, very high prospect and was seen as like probably as good of a recovery after, what happened with Dante Moore as whatever. And like, let's be honest, if Kenny Minchie wins the job, I wouldn't be surprised if he's better than Dante Moore at Oregon this year. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
It will be interesting to see how this all unfolds. And I know a lot of people are like, well, who's going to start? What do you think? And all this type of thing. I will say I had heard that Marcus felt like Carr and Minchie, and I don't want to say that in that order. That's not there was no order that I was given, but I do think Marcus felt like Carr and Minchie were the two guys even before the spring game happened. Felt like, that I'd heard that. And I think that's important. You know what I mean? Because I think that says they were feeling this way for a while. You know what I mean? Um, and so we'll have to see how it all unfolds. I mean, I think a lot of people, like if you ask the Notre Dame fans now, they all think it's CJ Carr. I wouldn't count out Kenny Minchie. I really wouldn't. I know Denbrock. I know he loves the fact that he can move. And when you watched what they did with Daniels at LSU, you got to say, if I'm Denbrock, I would love to have something like that. I would love to have that kind of a player. But there's a lot of growth that needs to happen really for both Carr and Minchie. And I think so much of it now is going to depend on how much you can eliminate the mistakes between now and the beginning of the season and leadership ability. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing because, is Kenny the leader that Angeli is? I don't know. I think if there's one area that Kenny probably needs to step up in, it's the leadership ability. I think CJ's probably a guy that's more of a leader at this point. And then we'll see what happens. But playmaking, all those types of things, it's going to be a battle. I really don't think that it is as clear cut as a lot of people think heading into this. And then we'll just see what happens. Let me ask you this question, Jamie. And this is down the road and we won't really know how far into the fall camp can you let this go? I mean, I don't think you can go more than 2 weeks. You know what I mean? I really don't think you can. But they may not announce it. They may not announce who the quarterback is, but I think within 2 weeks, you got to have a pretty good understanding of who your guy is. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say that. I think that's pretty fair. Maybe just over, maybe like 2.5 weeks or something, like, because you want to have, you want to go into that game, the first game against Miami, which is right at the end of August there. You want to go in with at least 2 full weeks of practices with your guy. I think that you think is going to be the starter there. I think that's important, especially for this guy's going to be his first start. Right. So I think that's really important that they kind of do that. I think there's so much in the summer that, it can't be evaluated, but it's going to be evaluated,
sure.
Like they're going to do that kind of stuff.
They're going to know for sure.
They're going to know, and they're also going to have an idea. Like if let's just say it's dead even right now. It won't be dead even going into the first practice there because they will view how whoever had what they did in the summer, right?
Leadership's going to be real important. I'm telling you,
for sure. And I will say too that, because I know you mentioned the thing about Minchie and leadership. And I mean, that one thing when I was there in the spring, I heard a lot of things because there's so many people that were already counting out Minchie that like the guys on the team, like really believe in him. Like, I'm not saying they didn't believe in Carr or anything. I'm just saying that's what that was something that like, they're like,
we had heard, like I mean, to be fair, we had heard that Minchie had been looking the best. I mean, that's what we'd heard. I mean, that's exactly what we'd heard. So, but that doesn't mean that's the way it was all the time,
Oh, yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. And obviously things can change, right? Things can change and you don't know. And like all of a sudden it can flip. I think one of the other things that like you kind of forget about is that Carr missed a lot of last year in terms of practices. So, he's kind of like was getting most of his reps that he's had since last spring, really, in that capacity. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting. And I think everyone's going to have an idea of, like I said, people have, it should be Carr, it should be Minchie, whatever, for whatever reason. I think the two things to remember are is that whoever wins a job, they earned it. Like they earned it, and they absolutely, that means they're a good player because the other guy they're beating out is a good player. So that's something to remember. And the second thing, and I think this is important because Mike Denbrock, obviously he's had a ton of success as a coordinator. His quarterbacks, so since 2019, with Ritter, with Daniels, with Leonard, every single one of them top 15 in EPA per rush. The dual threat part of it is a big thing. that I don't know if that was like the main thing that, separated these two from Angeli, because I think Angeli can run. It's just not the same as these guys. I think are a little bit more dynamic athletes. But that is something to note, is that you didn't see really Carr really run that much. But trust me, he can run. He can run, and he can do
move,
these things. And that's going to be a part of the offense. Those guys, his quarterbacks over that time averaged 10 rushing touchdowns and 50 first downs rushing. So it's going to be a huge part of the offense, no matter what. Like not as much as Leonard last year, where they rely on him all the time in short yardage and all that stuff. I don't think that's going to happen with either of these guys, but it's going to be a factor. So, if everything's even, does that give an edge to Minchie or whatever? I don't think so, because I think Carr really can run too. But I don't know. That is something that I think people should monitor and think about.
Obviously, the next question everybody wants to know is who's next? Who's going to transfer out next? And we know Kennedy Urlacher is gone. We know that the long snapper is gone. I'm a little concerned. You never know who's going to go. There's not. When is the final day of that? Do you know?
The 23rd.
23rd. Okay, so it's not far off. Yeah. So these guys will have to jump in the portal.
Or 25th. Sorry, I think it's 25th. Sorry.
Is it 25th? So that'd be Friday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Friday.
Yeah.
So some guys are going to have to jump into this, and if they're going to, Notre Dame's going to have to do something, because, if you're looking at the 105, some guys are going to have to be gone. Whether that's walk-ons or whatever the case may be. And again, we don't know the whole situation there. It's kind of funny, because I think a lot of people thought that this thing would be wrapped up by now, but as I was pointing out, there's going to be so many things contested to this settlement that who knows when this thing will be done. Who knows when they'll actually finally agree on some things. And if you kind of read what followed with it, Jamie, it's almost like there's more questions before or after that hearing than there was before. And to me, that means that, there's probably some things that still need to be ironed out, and we don't know. But, Notre Dame is obviously preparing for if the 105 takes into effect. We've heard a few names. I won't go into any names or anything like that. I don't think that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. But I got to believe that there's probably going to be a couple more at this point. And if there is, the good news is I think Notre Dame has the depth to overcome anything that would happen at this point. In the past, if you'd lose some key guys, it's going, it would be difficult to overcome. But I think Notre Dame definitely has the depth to overcome this. And here's the other thing. Behind the scenes, we hear a lot about Notre Dame's players being approached. And this is what it comes down to. A lot of people think that, okay, well, in recruiting, we just need to pay this guy a bunch of money and come. This guy's just got to come. And, we just pay this guy and Notre Dame is being cheap and they're not doing this. This is the time where it gets scary if you're a head coach, right? Because your great players, your very best players, are being offered millions of dollars to go elsewhere. And, this is happening to all of Notre Dame's very best players at this point. And that's going to happen every time the portal opens up. So you have to have money in reserve to make sure that you have enough money to go pursue and also keep the players that you want. And that's going to be, I think, the future of things. It's going to be kind of scary is, can you hold on to the last minute kind of bidding wars that's going to happen when these portal open and all these schools are trying to pull these guys into the portal? Because that's what happens. Notre Dame's players aren't in the portal, but agents get in their ear and get in their head and say, oh, you know what? X school is offering this and Y is offering that, and we should consider this, and maybe we can use that number to then drive up the price what Notre Dame pays you. And that's just the way this is going to be moving forward. And so it's real important when it comes down to the money part of things that people understand that you can't just give all this money to all these recruits or at I guess the end of the football season and say that's it, because that's not it. You may come up to some sort of agreement in January or whenever the season's over and say, okay, well, this is now the number, but that's only the number until the next portal opens up, and then somebody comes and offers your star player a whole bunch more money. And so this is why getting Mike Martin, I think, was the smartest thing that Notre Dame possibly could do. And while I don't think he's going to have the same kind of connections that some of these others may have to high school coaches around the country and all this type of thing, it's going to be extremely important to understand the financial part of things and how to balance all of this and what's most important, keeping your players, that type of thing. So thoughts on this real quick.
Yeah. And I think even to that effect, having relationships with agents like that is important, because it's obviously an important part of the NFL and all that. Like, you have to have relationships with these people who are there, because you're going to their clients, and that's like the intermediary there, right? And so I think that is important, because also it's important to know, like, they're gonna be the ones who tell you, hey, this guy's going in the portal too, right? But to someone else, not even on your team, right? To other guys, right? So you have to be able to know that stuff and get a heads up. And that's why too, when you see some of these guys get up onto the do not contact tag, everybody thinks it's always done through like, oh, well, they contacted them and they had a relationship. It was like, a lot of it is like second, third hand, extra stuff that's done behind the scenes that's done. So I think one thing it shows though is, and I think Notre Dame, and you got to tip your cap to Marcus Freeman, and then everybody, they're behind the scenes, and everyone there is, you have to understand, first of all, which of your players are the guys that teams are going to go after, and who you value the most. You have to understand that. So it's pretty obvious, like Jeremiah Love, like, yes, he is like a transcendent talent. People are going to go after him. They have gone after him. Like that is going to happen. Just like, that Ben Morrison last year, like that what is going to happen. Right. Leonard Moore, I'm sure, like, you have to understand that. And if you don't understand that right away, then you're already lost. Those guys are probably going to leave because you don't value them in a certain way. But also, it's so important. And I think this is, probably gets overlooked with it, is that for Notre Dame, so many of these kids who choose Notre Dame, and a big part of them choosing Notre Dame doesn't have anything to do with NIL money. And even if they want NIL money, just like they want it to be even, whatever, that's not why they chose Notre Dame. Right. So chances are that's not why they would be looking to leave either. And that also means that the parents, even though some of the parents are into it, a lot of those kids that are all that it's their recruitment's driven by NIL, those parents already steered those kids away from Notre Dame before they even chose Notre Dame. So most of the kids at Notre Dame, like 99% of them basically, are guys that their parents are already like, hey, you have good relationships with them because they understand why their kid chose Notre Dame and why they wanted their kid to go to Notre Dame. So kind of maintaining those relationships with the parents, obviously with your players, having good relationships with your players. If you have that right away, you're ahead of the game when it comes to this stuff, because you can just go and actually you can go and talk to them. And obviously everyone wants a competitive, they want to have a fair thing. If someone's offering them a crazy amount of money, you have to talk to them and you have to, be fair to them and all that. But so much, if you don't have a good relationship, those guys are just going to leave. They're going to leave. Yeah. And if you have it already established that, like, hey, I'm tight with my position coach, I'm tight with Mark. I have a good relationship with Marcus Freeman. I know he cares about me. I know like the parents know that like, you know, the staff there cares about them. They value the degree and all of that. It's not as, that's why you don't see so many guys being poached from Notre Dame. And sure, there's going to be some people that leave and that's fine. And there's going to be people that leave at positions that probably they're crowded already. And you get it and you totally understand it. But at the same time, you're just not going to see too many guys go. Not just because of like, you know, Notre Dame's in a good spot and they're successful, but also because they've already established these things. And that's what got these kids there in the first place. So I don't think it's anything that like, there might be some good players that go in from Notre Dame and that's fine. But there's going to be very few of them even if it does happen. And even some of the names that we hear, because we've always heard names, Mike, even before like, you know, the portal was as crazy as it is now. We always heard every offseason, this guy's thinking about leaving, this guy's whatever. And majority of those guys don't end up leaving. So you just never know. Someone could, but you also never know, which is why too, people shouldn't be irresponsible reporting names because a lot of those guys end up staying.
Yeah. They do, and that's why we don't really post any of these rumors. And I think in the past it used to be because the parents would make them stay. But first of all, I think, you know, with Jeremiah Love, you bring up that example. If you needed another reason to love Jeremiah Love, you know, I've heard that basically he took less so others could have more. I love players like that. I absolutely love players like that. And that's the culture that Marcus Freeman is building. And you know, so that's what you're trying to do. I know of another player that probably isn't going to start this year, could have gone to a lot of other places and made a lot of money, even had family members pushing him to do this. And he said, no, I love it here at Notre Dame. I'm not going. I don't want to go. I love it here at Notre Dame. So it's the culture that they're building that's very, very important. And Jamie, you know where you hear it? Where I really start to believe it is when these recruits come and they talk about it afterwards and they say, wow, you know, they got something really cool going on there. And you hear it almost per man, you know, when they come and they talk about, you know, I really like the culture there. I really like how everybody's, you know, really dialed in and everybody's all about this and they're mad they didn't win the national championship. And, you know, it's just really interesting to hear that. And it's starting to be backed up by not a lot of guys leaving. And I think the only guys who are leaving are a lot of times because they don't have an opportunity or they're not guaranteed the opportunity that they could get somewhere else. And so we'll see what happens. You know, I would guess there may be another couple that go in the portal in the end. I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen, but I think that it's going to be a situation where Notre Dame will be able to overcome whatever happens. It's just going to be this is just the reality of what we're going to see moving forward, unfortunately. So, on the other end of this, I wanted to mention the NFL draft. And, you know, the interesting thing, I'm a big draft guy. I know you are. I know Greg is. We all kind of follow it and talk about it, you know, in our ISD chat and things like that. The thing that's amazing to me is you look and you think, man, Notre Dame went and played in the national championship game. And unlike probably some other situations previously, they had to earn their way there. I mean, you know, it wasn't like they just got lucky in one game and then ended up in the national championship game. They had to play some tough games to get there. 3 difficult opponents. And when you look at the draft prospects of the guys that are on, you know, from Notre Dame, you're just like, how did Notre Dame get there? You know, how did they get there? Because everybody else that's in there has multiple first-round draft picks and a bunch of second-round guys, and then you're like, you know, how did Notre Dame get there? And you know, obviously, I think Ben Morrison probably would have been a lower first-round pick had he stayed healthy. I think X Watts. You know, it'll be interesting. I think he'll get a second round. I actually think somebody's going to take a chance on him in the second round because, you know, it's kind of like a Brian Branch, you know, where, you know, for Detroit Lions, he's not going to wow you with anything. It's just he makes play after play after play, and football teams eventually want guys that do smart things, especially at the safety position. So, I would guess that second round will probably be the highest anybody goes, and a lot of third, fourth, fifth, sixth round guys. Some not even going to be drafted, and I think that says a lot about the culture at Notre Dame. I think it says a lot about the teaching and the coaching at Notre Dame and what they were able to do. It's just really kind of remarkable. I can't remember too many teams that got to this level that the draft, immediately after was not full of, all these types of star players. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's, well, one, it's a testament to the talent that I think that Notre Dame has out of the younger guys on
Yes,
the
I
team,
agree.
because I think that is definitely something, because you think about, like, when you're playing Georgia and you get like Adon Schuler coming in and like making a big play on a fourth down and popping the ball out. Like, you think about Drake Bowen in that game. Like, you think about these guys that obviously are going to be huge parts of Notre Dame's team this year, right? And there's so much talent on the team that it wasn't draft eligible, that young, that I do think are going to be high, eventually going to be pretty high picks. So I think, that plays a part in it. But I also think it's like a lot of it is like coaching. You have to say the coaching was outstanding.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is that I think just development throughout the roster of just like getting these guys to play at a certain level, and like playing to like the peak of the level that they can play at. And I just think if you would have just said, there's so many different things. You said, well, Howard Cross, one of the best defensive tackles in college football the previous year, right? Well, he's going to basically not be healthy the whole year. And then he's not going to be healthy in the playoff run. He's going to be playing on one ankle. And then you said, well, Ben Morrison, he's going to miss half the year. And he's not, the one of the best corners in college football. He's not going to be there half the year. And you just said two guys who were like basically all American caliber on your defense. You're not getting that. And you say Riley Mills is like, yeah, he's gonna be your best defensive tackle, but he's hurt. He tears his knee and he's out for the thing. You would have just said no way that Notre Dame would have ever done any of this stuff. Or that Mitchell Evans was not going to be, yes, he upped his level at the end of the year, but it took him a long time to recover to get back to where he's at before they made him a bigger part of the offense. So he was not the same player that he was the year before. And all those guys, if you said all those guys didn't do it, weren't there, you would have said no way that it ever happened. But I think it goes to show the coaching and the depth of the program and what they've done there with those guys, and the youth of the program, and what they've done with like the guys that, Freeman and, the Freeman era have recruited and done. And I think that's really a tip of the cap to them, because there's just not a lot of guys there that are going to be high picks, but also too, some of these guys, it just goes to show, like Jack Kaiser, not going to be a high pick. I mean, I guess there's a debate whether or not he's even going to get drafted. That's a pretty good ball player.
Crazy.
Yeah,
I think he'll get drafted, but
I hope he does. I think he should. He definitely should.
Yeah.
I think he will, but you always just see like, I never know, because you see some of these weird media mock drafts where you're like, he's like the 280th or whatever the pick, like, and you're just like, wow, he's really going to go. I thought he'd be like 5th round or something, right? Like, you just never know. You never know with how these teams are going to value certain guys and positions and stuff. But just because how someone is valued a certain way doesn't mean they didn't play at a certain level to get there. And I think that, there's so much of that from Notre Dame. And I do think that as you kind of go forward this year, this next draft, and then the draft after, especially, there's going to be a lot of guys that they're where we haven't really seen, because I don't think, maybe, I guess, Holt's time, when it was like the draft was even bigger, they probably had like double-digit picks a couple times or whatever like that. I do think they're going to have like some years where there's double digit picks, and that's going to become like more of like kind of a normal thing because they just have more of that throughout the roster.
Yeah. I think you'll see. I mean, you could see at some point um, uh, Leonard Moore, Young, and Knapp all in the first round. I could see that happening. I really do think that's a very legit thing that could happen in a couple years. And then there's probably some other guys that are on the roster that have the same type of situation. Who knows? After watching Carson Hobbs, maybe he's the second corner that goes in the first round, and in the same draft. You just never know what's going to happen. But I'm excited to see about the future of this team, and I think that they've done such a good job of finding the guys that fit the program, fit what they want to do. They've really done a great job of evaluating the talent that they see, and I'm really excited about what we're going to see moving forward. If you're Marcus Freeman, right, and you have these two young quarterbacks, and you've made that decision, and I want to get Greg's opinion on this too. What do you say to these two quarterbacks, and what do you say to them about how they need to handle this offseason? Because I really think that's going to be a huge part of how much success they have. We'll start with you, Yama. What do you say to these young quarterbacks?
Well, I don't even know if there's much that needs to be kind of said, because I think they understand the gravity of like what is the chance that they have, right? Like this opportunity, it's a huge opportunity, right? Like they have a chance to be the quarterback for a team that is going to go into the season seen as a team, as a college football playoff team, a team that could very well be in the national championship game again. And now where I don't think where last year, there's always going to be some haters that viewed as a fluke. I don't think people view Notre Dame as a fluke or like, oh, they're a fringe thing, or like how you said before, where they kind of lucked their way into it or things happened, whatever. That I don't think that people view that anymore. I think they view Notre Dame as like, oh, Notre Dame is a real program under Marcus Freeman. And so I think those guys understand the opportunity that's there. I don't think that he has to say much, to be honest. I think he just has to say like, listen, just go out and like, exactly what the opportunity is. Like you have to go out and take advantage of it. And obviously they're going to have like Gino and Mike Denbrock and those guys to lean on in terms of direction of what specifically things they want to work on or whatever. But I don't think he has to tell them anything in terms of like, oh, this is exactly what we need from you in terms of leadership. Because I think those guys kind of know it's like, if I want to be the guy, I got to act like the guy, and they got to do it. So that to me, that's just like, both those guys should be super excited about the opportunity.
Greg, your thoughts?
I think Marcus is, well, I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, don't concern yourself with an uncertain future. He said it always says it. You just go out and be the best version of yourself. I think for those guys, I think they can guarantee they get on the field. After I watched the spring game, I think I have started to really open my mind to the fact that they're going to play two this year. I don't know that either of them will ever separate enough from the other one to where it's like the other one isn't going to get on the field, because I think both of them are good enough to play, and I think they are going to play two this year. I don't see how Kenny Minchie is not involved on a week-to-week basis. He's too versatile. I don't know how you do that, and I don't know how you turn away.
Is that a good idea?
The ball. I don't know if it's
a good idea.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a good idea.
I see where you're going.
All I know is that I'm opening. I don't like the idea of it. I've never liked it, but I'm opening my mind to the fact that that is a thing that they might try. I think both of them are going to end up being too good to not play one of them. I don't think they can truly choose just one.
You
They're too
remember?
good.
That's a good point because Denbrock did that in the game against LSU. In the bowl game. Especially in that Miami game. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know who it's going to be. Um, and it certainly worked in that LSU game when they played LSU at the in New York, the Pinstripe Bowl, I think it was. Um, you know that very well could be, and boy, it would throw a wrench into what Miami can defend and do. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think you want to continue to do that. I don't think that that's something you want to do throughout the year unless you absolutely have to. But
Yeah.
I could see that being a situation, especially if it just hasn't. If by week 2 you just haven't seen a big difference between the two. I can see that happening. It's entirely possible.
I'll ask both of you this. I'm not advocating for it because I've never liked the idea of it. Can either of you see a scenario where either Carr or Minchie is just standing there during the game, doing nothing? Just being
being the backup quarterback?
Yeah.
I can't. I totally can.
I can't see it.
Yeah.
I can't see it. I don't think either of them will be bad enough versus the other one to where it's like, or I just think they're too good. I think they're. Here's the other part that I was thinking about. When has there ever been a situation where you had two quarterbacks, the incumbent leaves, the one who's actually played serious snaps, and Jelly has played serious snaps. He leaves, and the job is left to two guys who have not really played. Minchie's played, but he hasn't played in a game where it was like meaningful, right? Like game pressure. He's never played in game pressure. Obviously, Angeli started a game, and he came in the Orange Bowl and things of that nature. They have two guys who have never played. It's very unique in college football, and you can't look at either of them and say, oh, we have this safety net of we kind of know how it's going to go. And so I don't know if it'll go through the whole time. I just think, and it's hard because, you have Miami and Texas A&M. You don't really have a runway into these bigger games. I just don't know that either of them will be good enough to separate from the other one, because I think the other one will make it kind of hard to separate. I think they're both going to be good. I watched both of them, and I'm just kind of like, I can't really see either of them not being a part of the football team in 2025 on the field. So that's where I'm at today.
I mean, I don't think both could play this year, and I think that is definitely which is also why I don't think that it would be a mistake for either whoever isn't QB1 at the beginning of the season. If that person was like, I'm out right away, I think that would be a mistake, because there's too much stuff that can happen during a season. Whether it's an injury, whether it's, some guys not playing that well, or just any kind of scenario where that other person might be needed, right? And might have to go, and then might just go and steal the job. And I think, I cited numerous times this offseason about the Kelly Bryant situation where, he came in and he was the quarterback. He was the returning quarterback at Clemson. They brought in Trevor Lawrence. He was obviously Mike. He was a generational talent, so he took over the job. But Kelly Bryant, they needed him to win that Texas A&M game at the beginning of the season, and there was Georgia won the national championship, and at the beginning of the season, Stetson Bennett was not the quarterback. He took over the job, right? He took over the job, and then it became his job. So I don't think there's going to be a situation. I don't see it like Greg, where it's like they're going to play both. I just don't see it in that way where it's like, well, they're going to use these guys as packages. I don't think that's what they're going to do. I just don't see it going that way. I think that the bowl game was kind of like a special circumstance.
Yeah, I'm not thinking. I'm not citing the bowl game as evidence. I think it was too. It's a one game thing. I don't.
But this is okay. So like this is what I think could happen is that you could go through those first couple games, and if you're not getting what you like out of this thing, and it is that close, like you said, Greg, it's like, well, one guy won they decided on one guy, but it is that close. They'll turn to the other guy and see how it goes. And that guy provides a spark, then he might be able to take the reins, and that might be his job the rest of the way. Or, it might be his job just for that game, and then we'll see. Because I think there's always the situation, which I always find hilarious, is the DJ Wagale and the Cade Klubnik when they were playing Notre Dame, and they're like, okay, well, here's Klubnik's job. Then he comes in and he throws the pick like right away to Ben Morrison. And then Klubnik, they were like, okay, well, DJ, you're finishing this game. Like, so that can happen too, right? Where the guy comes in and it's whatever. Because I think probably the Miami 2017, they probably wanted Ian Book to take that job at that point. They were like, take this job. And then he came in and it was not good. And then that's why he didn't get a chance to get into the bowl game, right? Yeah. So there could be all these kind of things that happen during the season. But I'll say this. It's not whoever wins a job in camp, it's not a guarantee that person finishes the season as the QB1. It's just, you got to kind of, I think you let it play out. I think both guys are very, very talented. And I think whoever wins that job is going to be like, man, that guy's good. Doesn't mean the other guy's not really good too. So I do see it in that way from Greg's perspective, but I don't see it where like, I just don't think that they're going to be like, hey, we're going to do this for like packages or whatever. I just think maybe they'll have a quick hook, but that's how I would kind of see it.
Yeah.
He's never had a quick hook before, though, and I'll say that about Kelly. Not Kelly. Gosh,
Marcus.
Oh, don't want to even mention that. Freeman. We've seen some bad quarterback play and guys not get replaced. So he tends to stick with guys, and so whoever I think is named the guy will probably have a pretty long leash, and we'll see. But I think losing games is where you're going to start to see the I guess, confidence crumble and go from there. But all right, I wanted to get to some of the questions. We got quite a few here, and we want to just rock through them real quick. Jamie, do you think we'll see a lot more 20 and 10 personnel this year versus and less 12? If you were the OC, how would you roughly break down personnel groups by percentage? And I think, first of all, I think that's game by game. You're going to look at it differently game by game, depending on what you're going against. But interesting question. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be there's not going to be way more 10 personnel and 20. I think you'll probably never see 20 personnel. Maybe you'll see it like once or twice the whole season. Maybe you'll see some 21. I think you'll see some of that. But I think the main thing you're going to see is 11 personnel is probably going to be the highest percentage. And I would say that's probably going to be like, I don't know, 40% or whatever. It's going to be pretty high, and they'll probably run a little bit less 12 this year than maybe we saw last year. And I think sorry. I was going to say, Mike, because one thing though, that they could do last year that you don't think about, because, when you're losing it, you're thinking about like, well, Jaden Thomas is gone. Deion Coles, they use those guys as blockers a lot, where they brought him in. They don't really have that big guy that they can bring in. I don't think they're going to use Malachi Fields that way. I think it'd be a mistake to do that. So because they don't have that, I do think that they are going to have to run more, like a little bit more 12 and stuff, or, some 21 stuff where they use the back in that way, as a lead blocker. So some of that, but I just don't think that they're ever going to be like a 10 personnel team where you're just going to see that very much. Like, even though they do have enough receivers that they could do that, you could see like they want to get like Pauling and Greathouse both in the slot, and they want to do these things. Yeah, sure. But I just don't think that's going to be a very high percentage of what they do. Like I could see maybe like a couple plays a game of that kind of thing. I just don't see them going that fully in that direction. Cause really too, that wasn't even how, at LSU, where they definitely had the kind of talent, Denbrock's last year there, they weren't like, a heavy 10 personnel or anything like that.
Yeah. I think it's going to depend a little bit on Eli. I think Eli will win the job. He'll be the starter. He's already been a good inline blocker. If he can continue to show that, then I think that they'll probably play a lot more, as you mentioned, 11, and we won't see a whole lot. But I think it's going to depend a lot on him and how much they can do with him in the run game. Can he be consistent inline blocker? Can they flex him out, do all those types of things that they like to do? But I think a lot of it's going to depend on him too, and how well he does, and can he just man that position, or are they going to need to bring guys in if they need to get aggressive in the running game and that type of thing? All right, if we're playing Miami tomorrow, who's behind center? I couldn't even begin to answer that. I really couldn't. We don't know enough at this point. I really couldn't begin to answer it. Any thoughts you have?
No, I feel the exact same way. I think it's like an impossible thing to answer at this point.
All right. If you were to compare Tobias to Cam, who is further along in the development at the same point in their sophomore season? And I think a lot of people are starting to look at Tobias and Cam as like similar situations and wondering, is this going to ever materialize? But I think the difference between Tobias and Cam is that Cam wants to be a great player and is committed to being that and is focused on that. I'm not saying that Tobias wasn't, but I also don't think that he always had the best mindset when it came to a lot of things. And so I think that, people just need to be a little bit patient with Cam. We tried to tell you it was going to take time because he had a lot to learn. Does knowing it is Carr versus Minchie change your expectations for the upcoming season? I don't know if it really changes anything. I mean, I could see them dropping a game because of an inexperienced quarterback. I could see that happening. But I also think that the ceiling to win big is higher too. I'd say that those are really the only two things that impact me. Your thoughts there, Jamie?
Yeah, and I don't even know. We don't know for a fact that, if Angeli stuck around, they're definitely beating Miami and A&M because he's the quarterback, right? Like, I think that's what some people maybe kind of view it as. Maybe that's how he's kind of framing the question. But I don't view it as like that was like a guarantee by any means. So, it doesn't really change.
A lot of people were saying, well, just, start Angeli for A&M and Miami and then, replace him. It's like, if he goes out and beats A&M and Miami,
then he should be the guy. Like, he should be the guy. You're like, what are we doing here?
Exactly. You're not going to punish the guy because he went out and won 2 big games.
Great job, Steve. All right. Now go get the water bottles, Steve, after you beat the 2 top teams of the schedule. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. We're going to bench you now. All right. Thoughts on Indy's opponents for next season and their transfer portal additions and departures that might be notable. Have seen Miami is desperate for wide receivers, USC for linebackers so far. A&M seems to have made some good additions at wide receiver, but may take a step back on defense. I know that's something that you're diving into. Yama, anything stand out? I know you're going to be doing something, but I think you're going to do that more after the portal closes. But anything stand out to you?
Yeah, definitely, because there's still, Miami's still trying to add. Then a lot of these teams are still trying to add. Like USC is obviously still trying to add. There's a lot of it. I mean, I think I'll just kind of concentrate on like the big ones because I think those are what kind of most people care about. But like Miami, obviously they're always active in the portal, and that's something, but they didn't get the receivers that they wanted, and they lost like their top 5 pass catchers from last season, and they didn't add really. Like, they added CJ Daniels from LSU. I mean, he was the 4th leading receiver for them last year, and it's not that he's a good player, he's fine, but he's not a guy that you're replacing. All of a sudden he's Xavier Restrepo, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy. So if they don't add in the portal, that's something to watch with them. If they don't add here in the portal, the spring portal, some receivers, they're going to be awfully young, and I'm not even sure how good at receiver. And that's something to watch. They did, I think, upgraded their defense. They really upgraded a DB. But always too, when you're playing like first game of the season and it's a whole bunch of new DBs, you got to see how that's going to look. A&M, I think A&M added a lot of like high ceiling dudes that were like really big time recruits at a lot of places, but that didn't really pan out. They also added Kevin Concepcion from, NC State, who was awesome as a freshman, not as good as a sophomore. Also kind of heard some like kind of, not the greatest character stuff about him. So we'll see. But I was talking to Carter Carrolls from, who covers Texas A&M the other day, and he was saying he had a really great spring. So we'll see. Arkansas lost a lot of guys who were starters in the portal, and they added people, but they lost a lot of talent. So I think they kind of took a step back. Boise State, just one of the things is that they're obviously a team that had a ton of guys coming back. Obviously, lost Ashton Genty from their star running back, the guy who's going to be a first round pick coming up. But they just lost two starters. They lost a starter at linebacker. They lost a starter at defensive tackle who just went in the spring portal. Obviously, those guys are going to get paid and they're leaving. So their defense is going to take a little bit of a hit. So that's kind of something to monitor. USC's they added some big defensive tackles, trying to kind of fix what they're doing on the defensive line there. But I don't know how great of players those guys are, to be honest. I think Keyshawn Silver's fine, but he's just a monster, but he's not a guy that I view as a game wrecker type. They also lost some guys in the offensive line. They added a guy from Syracuse to starting center that is pretty good, but they lost Emmanuel Pregnon, who was their best guard last year. They lost their starting right tackle. I don't know. I think USC's kind of a lot like they were last year, and they lost some good talent at receiver too. So they're not as deep at receiver. So that's something to kind of think about. Syracuse, Angeli, I think there's a lot of reasons to think if Angeli goes there, you'd be like, wow, that'd be a good thing. They already named Ricky Collins as their starting quarterback, so I don't know how that kind of went. He was a transfer from LSU. They just lost their top receiver. He's going to go out because he wanted a payday. Yeah. They are really not returning a lot on offense. So it's, I mentioned they lost the center too, who left. They lost another defensive lineman who was a starter to who wants to get more money too. So, I know they won 10 games last year. They might not be good this year just because of they lost so much. And I think they're trying to kind of build it up. Rand Brown's trying to kind of build it up, develop guys and not just rely on the portal that much. So I don't know. I think all in all, I don't think too many of the teams were. I think A&M is the most interesting because they added all these guys that I think have a chance to be so Samuel Mpemba from Georgia, who's man, he was just a lights out recruit, a freak athlete, whatever. Maybe that guy can be awesome.
Yeah.
But he didn't play it at Georgia last year. There's a reason why that's why he's out. He didn't make it. And if he would have stayed, you would have thought he would have been in line, but it was maybe he was a guy who was not good enough to play at Georgia. Right. So it's, I don't know. So I think there's a lot of risk reward things with A&M that I think is going to be interesting. Cause I do think, they're kind of searching to try to get, they're probably a year away from the guys they're recruiting from being really big impact guys for them. So I think they're kind of an enigma where they could be really good, or, some of their additions could be really good, but some of them might be a little bit shots in the dark, kind of a little bit SC where it's a lot of hit and miss.
Yeah. All right. There's some questions here. We're probably not going to get to any because we're all over time and everything. Mike, you've said that Jadon Blair, you'd like to see him get a look at wide receiver, setting aside the specifics of the current position group need. What are the differences and ideal physical characteristics between a wide receiver and safety? Well, I mean, I think that Look, the reason I like Blair at wide receiver is if you watch his senior film, he goes up and gets a lot of balls. So he's an athletic dude. The good news is if he's playing safety, he can do the same thing on that side of the ball. But, he has the potential because of his height, and he's a good athlete. He could be a boundary guy that could stretch the field for you. But just watching his ball skills, he looks like a guy who can go up and get in the football. So the only reason I mention that is because, especially if you read my wide receiver stuff, there's just not a lot of height next year. There really isn't. Micah Gilbert's the tallest guy you got at 6'2", and there's really not a lot of boundary receivers. So that's why I kind of mentioned that it'd be interesting to see. And if you watch his senior film, a lot of it was offense. It wasn't defense. And he's a good guy. He can get after the football. So, but I understand why they want him there at safety because, there's not a lot of 6'5" guys. The last 6'5" guy we had turned out to be pretty good. So, it is what it is. And I think he's a really good athlete and we'll just see how it all plays out. All right. People want to know about the 105 roster and what happened there. Again, there was a meeting in at the end of I should say it was middle of April. And things just didn't get finalized like a lot of people had hoped. They're supposed to come back and have some revisions. The judge is asking for revisions. The NCAA is basically saying no. The revisions are about the 105. That's the one thing that they're kind of fighting about is, they don't want a lot of players to get cut. Some of the schools are saying, yes, we do. So it's just there's a lot of infighting going on this, and that's why it hasn't been resolved. A person wants to know how does that change with the roster? And that's the interesting thing, Jamie. Let's take a situation like running back, right? So right now Notre Dame has 8 running backs on the roster when you look at the 2 walk-ons, and if you get down to 105, that'll probably trim it to 7, maybe 6. But are you going to be able to get 6 quality running backs to come in and be on the roster moving forward? Because if you got a lot of talent up front, like Notre Dame has shown in Jeremiah Love and then J.D. Price, and they're gone, but then that Aeneas Williams is a good player. People talk highly on Kedron Young. Nolan James showed what he could do. So when you look at the situation, how are you going to get that extra player that's going to be your roster guy, the guy that's going to play scout team for you? And it's great in that you can give that person a scholarship, a full ride now, although they're getting that essentially now because most of them are getting a stipend of some amount, and that'll pay for your college and everything. I don't know what the number is, but I'd assume it's, fairly good sized. But now you get a full scholarship. That's a good thing. But a lot of the guys, how do you recruit a guy and say, you know what, we like you, but you're going to play scout team. You know what I mean? That guy could probably go get a scholarship somewhere else. And that's going to happen when you're looking at the number, 8 or 9 wide receiver. You're looking at the 17th offensive lineman, the 17th defensive lineman. These are all things that are going to play and factor. And how do you approach that? Does it make sense to go, okay, we're going to go, find some kid at Harvard that, maybe wants to further his education and get a master's degree. We're going to go find, some guy who is only played 1 year of football and doesn't have a lot of offers right now, but we believe he has the potential to be a great player and come in, and you're our developmental guy. I mean, it's going to be interesting how you're going to fill out the roster at 105 because a walk-on knows what he is. If you're given a scholarship, the guy wants to go and play, and if he's getting your scholarship, he could probably go get a scholarship somewhere else and may have a better chance to play at Purdue than he does Notre Dame. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing that Notre Dame's going to have to battle with. So, Jamie, before you speak, it looks like you're muted. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think
Well, first of all, I think that one of the things that when they were kind of looking at it, and the judge, if anyone who's followed it, the judge asked for, make amendments to what the NCAA had proposed, and they made like no amendments. They made like the smallest amendments, period. And one of the things was to also grandfather in the 105. So like you're not booting out these walk-ons that are already on the team. And for whatever reason, they said no to that, which is stupid. It's like they've already been taking on this for I don't know how many years. You can't just let like most of these guys, there's very few like freshman walk-ons that are going to stick around for 4 years extra that you're going to have there. So like, what are we doing with this in terms of like not allowing that or changing that? That's just stupid. I think that is part of the reason why I don't think like, it doesn't really sound like the 105 is going to happen like this
right away.
Right away. Like it'll next year, whatever. And I don't know. It's. I mean, everyone has already had meetings to manage. It's like everybody always has meetings because it's like, well, this is all of a sudden, when you change the transfer portal dates or you do this, they always have meetings to prepare for all this kind of stuff. So I'm sure they have kind of a plan for exactly what they want to do and how many guys you want to have at certain positions in order to kind of run your program exactly like you said, because people don't think about scout team and whatnot. But like that is so it is huge. It's a huge part of it. Just like how there's so much with the NFL in terms of like the practice squad guys and what those guys and the value that they get, especially because those guys aren't like, on the roster. They're not going to play, but you need those guys. And they've obviously expanded that. I think everyone's going to have something different. I'm sure Notre Dame will view it a certain way. And to be honest, I think there's probably going to be a lot of mistakes that early on of the teams make, and then they'll have to amend it and just be like, well, we didn't have enough linemen, or we didn't have enough this or that.
Yeah.
Which, I don't think that's ever going to happen in Notre Dame where they say, hey, we don't have enough linemen. I think they'll always go heavy on the lineman part of it, because I think you always should. But it is going to be interesting because I think, there are going to be some positions that take a hit, and I don't know. I hate everything about this 105 thing. I think it's dumb.
I do too. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, get to 120, but even if it was 120, it'd still be that problem. It's like, oh, I can get a scholarship at Notre Dame. Well, if I'm good enough to get a scholarship at Notre Dame, I could probably get a scholarship anywhere else, and I might have a better chance to play there. Where with a walk-on, you just kind of understood your role. You know what I mean? And you're going to have to try and find a whole bunch of Luke Toliches. You know what I mean? Either go that route where you're like, okay, you're in Wyoming, nobody knows about you. We're going to take a chance on you, but we think you have a chance to play, and hope that those guys come, or you're going to have to try and get some guys who are, looking for an extra, 60,000 or an extra whatever, a master's degree. And that's really the way you're going to have to fill it out. And it's going to be a difficult situation because a lot of those guys are going to realize that they don't have a real opportunity to play. So, question was, Angeli told you're not the quarterback number one, or was he told the two-man competition in the fall will be Carr and Minchie? I think it was the other. I think he was told it was Carr and Minchie, and that, he had was not probably going to be in the running there. What's the status on Gordon Sellers? Again, he committed to Clemson. Every once in a while, Notre Dame can get a guy like that to shake loose, but Notre Dame wasn't able to get him not to commit to Clemson. And I don't know. To me, I think that's kind of telling. You know what I mean? There's just not enough time there. They may have a time to continue to work that relationship and that type of thing. And again, I think so much of it's going to depend on what happens at Notre Dame, in the passing game. Can they start showing the wide receivers can, become a big playmaking part of the offense? And if they can show that, guys may be more interested. But, look, Clemson's going to show a lot. They have an experienced quarterback that's going to throw the ball. So it's going to be it'll be an interesting situation comparing the two. But I don't know. A lot of times when a guy makes a decision like that, it's hard to get him to flip. All right. What are you feeling about the remaining board at DL and DB recruiting, and who do they have a good shot at? Well, I think, for defensive line, they're in great shape. I think they got a great shot at Tiki Hola and Noah Clark for two interior guys. And I think they could potentially take both because they're different players. And, we'll see. As far as other guys, I think they got a great shot at Drake Quinn, Xavier Griffin-Haynes, Mikkel Blade, and Elijah Golden. So, there's a chance that I will say this. I would be surprised if Notre Dame isn't at least number 2 on all of those defensive linemen I just mentioned there. And I would guess for the vast majority, they're the number 1 school right now. So they're in good shape. As far as DB goes, that's going to be tougher. You just don't know. Kari Adams, Jazeel Hart, Jordan Thomas, Nick Reddish, Joey O'Brien. Those are kind of the names that are out there right now that I think they have a good shot at. But I'd say this, at DB, there's not as much room for missing, and that's a little bit of a concern for me. Your thoughts here, Jamie?
Yeah, I would say that it is a little bit of a concern, but it does seem that I will say Mike Mickens, he does tend to close pretty well on a lot of the guys that he really wants.
Yep.
So we'll see. I mean, I think there's a lot of and when those guys have come to campus, the things have been really good. So we'll see how it goes, but I do think that's probably, like, as they get into more officials, we're going to see that. And we'll also see if they get into May and it's like the eval period, if they kind of expand there, because I think that could happen too. I mean, that's one thing that I've loved to see actually, is that even though I think they're in good shape at defensive line, like, they're still offering guys and guys that are good, guys that are good. Yeah. Like, I really like the
Can we take them all?
Yeah,
I'd take all those guys. I really would. I'd take every one of them.
Oh yeah,
I really would. I like every guy.
Alistair Vallejo, like I think that guy's a stud. He's good. Like, so I mean, I think that is a guy totally, like, even if you're in good shape, you watch him in his film and you just like, yeah, we should offer this guy. Like, yeah. So I just think that I like how they've approached it, and I hope they continue to do that in DB as well.
All right, last question is more of a comment. I have a theory. For the last 3+ years, we've been watching the transformation of the real Marcus Freeman. He's evolved from I got to read this right. He's evolved from the tentative and reserved head coach into his real coaching self, which is aggressive, much more willing to take a risk. Decision to let Steve Angeli go is just the latest iteration of a strong leader. All last year, we saw him evolve to a more animated sideline leader, a coach who's willing to go out and go for it more on 4th down, a coach who planned and endorsed numerous fake punts in key spots, and now making riskier quarterback choices. I agree. And I think Marcus Freeman had to do that. I think he had to kind of ease his way into who he is as a coach, because I don't think you want to go. I'll give you a perfect example of this. Who Charlie Weiss was the first year versus who Charlie Weiss was when he left, totally different person, just really was. And I don't think that helped him in becoming the type of coach that he wanted to be. I think it confused a lot of people. I think the way Marcus Freeman handled it and evolved with kind of a cautious approach to it. You don't want to overreact. You don't want to do something stupid and then just learn from whatever mistakes. I think he did a tremendous job, and I think you're right. You're starting to see the Marcus Freeman that we all thought he would be, and I think we're really starting to get it now. And I think even this year he'll probably maybe get a little bit more animated. I don't think he'll be, Saban or any of the crazy guys that you see on the sidelines, but I think I think he's seen one, that he can get away with it, and two, that it has a positive impact. You got to fight for your guys out there, man. And the guys want to know you're fighting for them too. And so I'm excited about what I see with this guy. I think he's going to be a tremendous coach, and I couldn't be happier with the whole situation. But your thoughts on this, Jamie? We'll close down the show, buddy.
I think it just makes so much sense that that's what was going to happen with him because, he's a first time head coach stepping into a different, like, frankly, crazily different than any kind of head coach has ever taken over. And with everything to do, the portal and there wasn't general managers before, there wasn't all of everything has changed so much. So he's been forced to evolve in those ways, kind of off the field. But I think he's just kind of finding himself as, his style and what exactly that he wants to be. And he's always I think he was an aggressive guy as a defensive coordinator, but then you step into that head role and you think, well, maybe I got to be like this instead. And I got to change a little bit.
Bigger stakes.
Of how, yeah. Right. Because, and I think too, that's Jim's a little bit again. But Jim Tressel, that was like a thing that with him, that it was, how he coached. And that's his mentor. So he thought, I got to kind of be like this and whatever. But I think part of it last year was he was coaching more free and just being like, hey, what am I out here? I'm trying to win. I got to coach not to lose. We're trying to win. And we're coaching here to win and be aggressive because that's exactly how he approached it before when he was a coordinator. And I think it's paid off. So I just think too, when you do that and you have success like leaning on more stuff like, hey, we're leaning on analytics more. We're doing all that. You just dive into it further because you just say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And it was successful. So why aren't we going to utilize all this stuff? And why aren't I going to be more aggressive? So I just think we're only going to see just him continue to evolve more and be the kind of guy that, we saw this year, just like, evolve was the big word that he said, all season, right? And just like, or enhance, right? And that's another, like, enhance. We're going to keep doing it. So I think that's what you're just going to see. He's just going to keep kind of be who he is. And I think he's learned probably a lot since he's, been at Notre Dame. And I think it all kind of sets up well for him going forward because I think he's really, really learned on the job and done a great job. And just, it's only going to, increase that because you look at, like, a guy like Saban, for example, him at early Michigan State is not at the same as he was at the end of Michigan State or when he was at LSU. When he was at LSU compared to Alabama, it was just constantly evolving.
Yeah. All right, folks, that's going to be it. Hope you enjoyed that. Looking forward to next week. And once again, if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, go to the front page, click on the premium section, sign up today. Also, you can find us on YouTube, find all our latest content there. Search for Irish Sports Daily. Make sure you subscribe and like our videos. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.